Hello, fellow critics. Welcome back to the alley. The show's still willing to slow things down and get that extra punch in. One of my favorite pastimes is roaming the irradiated wastelands in search of lawn gnomes and sugar bombs. Setting up headless raiders for tea parties, meeting all the charming locals. All the apocalyptic fun the wild wasteland has to offer. Fallout is a deep, dark, twisted metro station filled with lore, war, and horror stories that'll keep you asking why as you try to carefully fish the ammo out of the irradiated toilet water without amidst the chaos of too many warring factions to count, with more of them popping up every day like mole rats, to the doomsday weapons that have been left behind for literally any idiot to stumble upon, including mini handheld warhead launchers. Within that mess, there was a shadowy corporation working in the darkness. Their misdeeds range from selling porta-potties as bomb shelters to the psychological and biological experimentation of humans that make the horrors of World War II seem like fairy tales. Vault-Tec, the first and last name in vault technology. As the slogan declares, Vault-Tec is America's biggest nuclear defense corporation, existing as early as 2031 when they absorbed Morgantown's local college, making it Vault-Tec University, where the sharpest minds gathered to lacerate the general public. In the early 2050s, with the European Middle Eastern War, the new plague breaking out, and the collapse of the United Nations, the government set Project Safe House into motion in about 2054. After a successful debut of its demonstration vault near its headquarters in LA, the company won that big government grant to begin working on their Geneva Convention shattering underground complexes, as well as that fancy new headquarters over in the Capital Wasteland, Washington, D.C. But the vaults were not the company's only auspicious product. Their list included food synthesizers, artificial intelligence, water pumps, nuclear reactors, bobbleheads, and an enigma known only as the V.A.T.S. It's a staple mechanic of the Fallout franchise. You know, this thing. Basically, bullet time battle analysis and the way it's executed varies slightly from game to game. Although it is known to be a product of Vault-Tec, the origins of the seemingly magical powers lost in the annals of time. Well, if you know me and my show, you know that just doesn't sit well with me. It makes me as sick as I get thinking about iguana bits. Where are all the iguanas? Guys, I'm here to mess things up and answer questions you probably didn't ask. So what is iguana bits made from? Okay, mystery solved. Now, more importantly, what is V.A.T.S. and how does it work? I got a theory for that one too, and I'm pretty sure I got about an 85% chance of a critical hit. What do we actually know about the Vault-Tec assisted targeting system? To start, we know it goes way back to the Pioneer Scouts, whose parents used it on occasions they got too wasted to aim. Merca! V.A.T.S, as we know it, is introduced to us as it is now in Fallout 3. In Fallout 1, 2, and Tactics, you can target specific body parts, and it's kind of on a turn-based combat system anyway. It's old school RPG style. So that's basically like them slowing down time anyway, right? That's close enough for me. 3, 4, 76, and New Vegas all have slightly different takes on it. That allows you to take a breath, as the advertisement says. From there, you get to choose the target and the limb that you want to zero in on, and it'll give you an estimate of your ability to hit and approximate damage done. Pretty helpful, right? Your actions in V.A.T.S are limited to your AP, or action points, which are used to set up a string of commands and replenish automatically depending on an algorithm which determines the amount of points you have and the cooldown rate. So what is it? Is it magic? Is it chem-fueled psychosis? Fellow critics, my solution is much simpler and more biological. Tell me, what do you know about catecholamines? Catecholamines include dopamine and epinephrine, or adrenaline, and are secreted from the two adrenal glands, which are located right above the kidneys. The medulla, or intersection of the adrenal glands, is what produces epinephrine and norepinephrine primarily, and uses them for the fight or flight response. So your eyes recognize a potential threat, activating the amygdala, sending emergency signals to the hypothalamus, which calls up the pituitary gland, who controls the adrenal glands, setting off an explosive chain of reactions very similar to the Great War of 2077. Which, fun fact, lasted about 2 hours, according to survivors. Once the adrenal glands drop that adrenaline, the body responds with heightened awareness, quicker response times, and even increased physical strength. Whee! One of the most noticeable changes is the perception of time, in my opinion. As a neurological coping mechanism, your brain will tend to break things down into more basic perceptions, which can be perceived as time slowing down in an attempt for you to respond to whatever event triggered this reaction. I've personally experienced this phenomenon in my own life on several occasions, so I can attest to its legitimacy as well. Once during a vehicle collision. Once I saw it happening, it was as if the world slowed down and I was unaffected by the crash. It collided with my door as I braced myself and looked over to check the driver who was interacting with their airbag at the time. I looked ahead and my airbag deployed and self-destructed before my astonished eyes. I'm very grateful my V.A.T.S went off, otherwise I could have very well eaten a face full of jagged plastic and metal bits and not been here laughing with you now. Another very relevant example is my last physical altercation as a teenager. The person came up intending to hurt me. As soon as I squared up, the world slowed down and I quickly examined my opponent, remembering which hand was their dominant hand and that they slightly had a limp earlier. As they moved in slow motion, I did not. So I utilized my AP, took a defensive stance, they swung, I swung. Rinse, repeat. Let me make this very, very clear. I do not endorse, nor do I encourage violence. That was self-defense and the last physical altercation that I got into. We use our charisma points now as adults. Strength is for carrying capacity, and for consensual extracurricular vault activities. Countless testimonies report similar occurrences to adrenaline rushes. It's not just me. You've no doubt noticed similarities and can probably see where I'm going. I'm proposing that V.A.T.S is controlled adrenaline rushes. Humanity has evolved to deal with their infinitely more stressful lives. Probably being assisted by the forced evolution virus, or FEV, which would explain why each protagonist has a slightly different version of it. Adrenaline does affect us all differently, like how some ghouls go feral faster than others. You ever think to yourself, I'd just be a crotchety old ghoul living in a mansion by himself? Get off my lawn, smooth skin. Regardless of whether this evolution was forced by the environment or forced by the virus, I think we can all agree that our protagonists are a little above average, right? The Vault Dweller from Vault 13 was descended from people who were handpicked to be used by the Enclave later as, likely either some experiment, but also to help rebuild the world someday. Knowing what we do about the Enclave, it's probably likely that they picked some of the best DNA and citizens and, subjects, whatever you want to call them, that they had available to them in the area. The guest list was including military and academics as well, so in Fallout 2, you are the grandchild of the Vault Dweller from Fallout 1, so not only do you have generations of those genetics that the Enclave go nuts for, but also you went out and have all that hunting experience and training with your parent and grandparent. One of them, at least, we know has that ability. The Lone Wanderer from Fallout 3 is the child of two very well-known doctors, renowned for their intellect and their ingenuity. I could very easily see James and Catherine creating a form of FEV that bonds properly and successfully to humans and giving it to their child to sorta hedge the survival odds, I could see James being the kind of dad who would test it on himself first even, just to make sure it wouldn't kill him, because I think we all agree James is probably one of the best dads. Remember, there are multiple occurrences of humans bonding with FEV successfully. Super mutants are the product of an overdose to FEV. Houdini-style dunk tank for 24 hours sort of thing. And that's just one strain. The FEV is surprisingly pre-programmable, behaving more like a computer virus that affects humans. A strain is utilized in the Generation 3 synths, making them arguably very similar to humans, with the very noticeable difference that they don't need to sleep, and their life kind of begins where it starts, with the memories of somebody or nothing. But third generation synths are basically just lab-grown organs inside 3D printed meat wrapping whose consciousness is written and run by the FEV. They aren't even metal anymore, except for the recall chip you can find on them post-mortem. But a great example of the FEV successfully bonding with humans. Well, synths, but they're derived from human DNA, and they don't immediately turn into dollar store Shrek knockoffs. So I would label that successful. There's even a rumor of something called a psyker being whispered across the wastelands, which is the direct result of humans being introduced to a certain strain of FEV. We'll talk more about that later, though. I don't think it's a stretch to say that the Lone Wanderer very likely gets their ability to literally slow down time with adrenaline from some form of FEV. Because aside from being able to V.A.T.S to the future in time, they seem to have access to some form of hysterical strength. If they're hit while they're executing their actions on V.A.T.S, then they take a mere 10% of the damage they would normally take, and they also have a 15% chance to hit a critical in the middle of this adrenaline-fused rage. Abstract perceptions of time, heightened pain tolerance, and hysterical strength are all real-world reported experiences with adrenaline rushes. Moving on to Fallout New Vegas, the Courier seems to have a similar V.A.T.S with some notable exceptions. The time slow effect, once activated, is far less dramatic, especially for non-combatants. On top of that, they receive 75% of the damage they would normally receive, as opposed to the Lone Wanderer's mere 10%. They also have a reduced 5% chance critical, as opposed to the 15% chance critical. My theory is they got exposed to a lesser version or a different strain or just different experiences over their travels, as opposed to what the others went through. With so many strains being easier to find than a freaking safe haven, it seems. People go to the bathroom and then wake up 3 years later as a super mutant. Did you hear what happened to Swan? And the Courier's just built different, dude. You open the game with a bullet to the dome.
Truth is, the game was rigged from the start.
And then by the end of it, he can be about 75% cybernetics depending on your choices. They're also considerably tougher than the Lone Wanderer in some ways when you consider like the hand-to-hand. When you get higher leveled, you'll start doing like suplexes and other combat moves. Must be all that Cazador stew! The Sole Survivor is a choice between Nate or Nora from Vault 111, and their V.A.T.S is pretty different from the others. For one, there is no time stop, only bullet time slow. They can break up the V.A.T.S sequence in a way the others cannot, showing exceptional homeostasis capabilities, controlling their own bodies like a light switch. Instead of the random chance crits like the hysterical strength gave you, this one kind of builds up to a big one, akin to hyperfocusing. I would attribute that to their military training adapting to their strain of FEV, which they could have very well gotten in the cryogenics chamber. Nate is a decorated war hero, and a lot of people agree that Nora probably has some military experience because of her familiarity with all kinds of weaponry, and the fact that she's able to hop right into the power armor good to go. Maybe JAG or something, because we know she was a lawyer. Even if not, I could see her being in an experiment alongside her high-profile husband, who also likely taught her to shoot if she didn't already know. My adrenaline theory might ruin the Sole Survivor as a synth theory, or does it help it? Fallout 76, the latest installment in the series, has you hailing from Vault 76, where you are one of the brave, the proud, America's finest. It is your prestigious destiny to be one of Vault-Tech's champions of humanity. You will live peacefully in one of Vault-Tech's state-of-the-art vaults, filled with everything you could want for 20 years, and then it's Reclamation Day. Reclamation Day, when we take back America for the people, by the people. Turns out, about 25 years later, after fear of the outside world and cabin fever mixes together to create this horrible thing, you are forced rather violently out of the vault as it shuts down to avoid creating a dependency on it. America! You also have a very different V.A.T.S system which doesn't slow anything down but does have a very persistent targeting system. Seems more like hyperfocusing being one of the key factors involved. To me, this says you have a different response to stimulus and, you know, a very weak strain of the FEV if one at all. Remember, this is still very early in the Fallout timeline. The Enclave hasn't even got to play with Frank Horrigan yet. So why is it called V.A.T.S and why does Vault-Tec have anything to do with it then? Simple. They programmed the interface on the PipBoy, slapped the Vault-Tec sticker on it, and then sell, sell, sell. If you make a big enough campaign, you can convince anyone of anything. Just look at Edison. Wait, hang on. There we go. My theory is that the PipBoy uses sonar similar to echolocation by sending out a small beep or ping and then measuring the response time. It can estimate your position from the object based on that ping and already has a catalog of all your weapons on it, including your fists. So it could then utilize that information and make a reasonable estimate on your ability to hit it, as well as the damage done within a reasonable percentage without mods or counting the criticals. That's why it doesn't go above 95. Normally. Using the Doppler effect, we can measure the amplitude of the echo, and that will help us determine the density of an object. Which is great for those games of guess how many gumballs I got in my jar. Since trauma to the body that creates immobility or bone damage will lead to a density change in that area, the PipBoy would be able to couple that ping back with some simple anatomy to be able to tell how much damage you're doing to that area and how much damage it can take as a threshold. Of course, this will always be an estimation, and that's why every shot isn't a perfect calculation. Not just the density change from the estimated damage, but if it pings off a swollen shoulder, it's gonna ring differently. This is why each PipBoy would have similar functions, keeping in mind that each protagonist has a slightly different PipBoy. It couples with the likely FEV advanced adrenaline response and meshes very nicely like cramming beans. So maybe it isn't pre-war magic or neural implants as some people have suggested. Well, maybe the courier. But humanity, once again overcoming our own stupidity so that we can repair the damage done to our planet. Our Mother Earth. Humans have a place in the circle. They just have to be willing to do what needs to be done to overcome. Because when the adrenaline drops, we all get a choice. And it may not always be clear, but victory, the survival of the human race, couldn't come from flight alone. You won't win any battles with a 95% chance of wetting your pants. The player chose to fight. Because war never changes. Critically yours, The Fox.